Jaddan, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you.
Mate,
Good to be here.
unbelievable to finally get you in the studio. How you going? You've been busy. Did you just get back from the States as well?
I did, yeah. I was over there. I got back a couple of weeks ago.
How was?
It was great. Yeah, it was my first trip overseas since February 2020.
What'd you do over there? Work stuff or?
Yeah, I was over there for work. I was in the US and Canada. We had Vance Joy doing a bunch of shows over there to launch his new album. And then we also had a big Tash Sultana show at Red Rocks, which is a really iconic venue just outside of Denver. It's like a 10,000 person outdoor amphitheater, like sort of in the mountains with just surrounded by these huge red rocks. It's pretty epic. So
Wow.
yeah, it was pretty cool.
How does one do that? Like, how does she go over there and like organize a show like that? Is that you guys? Like, is that like you do that as a team or?
Yeah, so we manage Tash's career
Yeah.
in conjunction with another company in Melbourne called Lemon Tree Music.
Mhm.
And yeah, we've been working together for about 4 years. And yeah, we started at the start in the US. You know, the first time I saw Tash play in America was in Boston. We had 200 people there. And yeah, that's sort of where it starts. And we went around the US again and again and again. And, you know, now we're selling out 10,000 tickets in Colorado, and, you know, the next stop will be the next stop. But yeah, it's just a bit of hard work.
Unbelievable. I can't wait to unpack this all today. And especially for you, you know, and knowing your story as we've met before. And it's an incredible one. And it truly is, you know, it's really inspired me, you know, in a similar industry that's so different, that, you know, what you've been able to do with yourself personally, Unified Music and our side stage ventures, it is really incredible. So I can't wait to chat. Let's start at the start because it's always a good way to go. What was your journey into music? How'd you get into it?
Well, yeah, right back to the start. Like, Mum wanted me and my two brothers to play music. So we started, I think everyone starts with the recorder, but like the real first instrument was the piano.
Running Bear?
What's that?
Running Bear? Did you ever play Running Bear on the recorder? Neither.
I'll have to check with Mum. But yeah, piano. I eventually started playing the clarinet. I wanted to play the sax, but they said, why don't you start with the clarinet and then we'll get you onto the sax when you're a bit older. But by the time I got around to that, I'd found the guitar. So I was about 13. I started playing Green Day and Nirvana and stuff like that. And that was when I really, I guess, first discovered music that I just loved, like just couldn't get enough of. And then I was about 13 years old, and Mum let me go and see The Offspring play at Festival Hall. So I was like 13 years old. And, you know, The Offspring now is sort of like a bit of a pop band, I guess. But back then when you're 13, like it was almost like the most dangerous, like crazy, chaotic place you could be as a 13-year-old. And the opening band was The Living End, who we all know. And so the first band I ever saw was The Living End, followed by The Offspring. And honestly, that was the night where my life really just changed, because I got so hooked on this idea of like being a part of, I guess, a culture of, you know, punk music and all this sort of stuff, and seeing people with mohawks and, you know, dyed hair and all that sort of stuff. So that was sort of when I got really, really hooked on it.
Unbelievable. You know, it's really crazy. Just since you've said that, I think I know the first band I ever saw was Green Day. So that was when I was in grade 6 in primary school. We went with my my best mate's dad, who was, you know, was a young, cool dad, took us to Green Day, sort of said to Mum, like, no, there's no swearing, you know, it is what it is. And I'm pretty sure The Living End opened for them as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it was like back at, you know, I think it was called Telstra Dome back then.
Yeah.
But yeah, incredible live show, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so around that time, my brother bought me The Offspring's album Smash, which is, you know, up until recently one of the biggest selling independent albums of all time. It was released on a label called Epitaph Records. And Epitaph Records is a label from California, started by Brett Gurewitz from a band called Bad Religion. And they put out some of the best punk rock records of all time, like Rancid, Bad Religion, Offspring. And I started to become really obsessive about this logo. And basically what I ended up doing was just going to, well, JB Hi-Fi or, you know, whatever other CD shops were around at the time. And I would just buy records that were on that label.
You're right.
Because I was like, well, if that stamp's on it, it must be good. And so it became this brand that I trusted. And as I got, you know, a little bit older, I found other brands like Fat Records, Burning Heart Records. These are other sort of punk labels from other parts of the world that I learned to trust. And then sort of got to this stage at one point where I was like, well, why don't I do that? You know, why don't I build something like that? Which sounds like a really crazy idea for I was probably about 15 when I started to have these thoughts. And then me and a friend had a band, and his dad worked at Shock Records, which used to be, you know, one of Australia's biggest independent record labels. And this guy, Sam, said to the two of us, he goes, oh, you guys got a band. Like, why don't you make a record and put it out on your own record label? And it was this really pivotal moment in my life where Jackson, the guy I started the band with, he heard, oh, awesome, we're going to put out a record. But I heard, oh, awesome, we're going to start a record label. And so within about 6 months, I left the band, he left the record label, and I went off and tried to see what it could be like to start a record label. And that was in 2001 going to 2002. I was 17, turning 18. I just finished high school. And I was, sitting in my bedroom in Eaglemont at my parents' house with a record label and trying to figure out how to make sense of that.
Where does one start with a record label? Did you have any idea what you were doing?
So the original idea we had for the label was to put out a compilation of Australian punk bands to sort of build a name for the brand, which was called Boomtown Records, before we put out our own record. And so
before Unified, you were Boomtown.
That's correct, yeah. And so this is kind of like really old school marketing, but we like literally went to like Beat Magazine and like in the classifieds put like 50 words like, Boomtown Records making compilation, send demos to this address. It's like that. It's 2002. It feels like a million years ago when you're doing things like that. And so people started sending in demos, and there was this one band called Wishful Thinking, and they sent in their whole album. And they said, well, we'd love to be on the compilation, but also we're looking for a label to put out this record. Like, what do you think? And I'm like, hell yeah, this is awesome. Really cool pop punk band. They've been playing shows with bands like Mill and Colin and MXPX, and I don't know if you know these bands, but these are all the bands that I used to go see. And so really all it took was they just needed their album put onto CDs. So I found a place to print CDs, and we printed the CDs, and I helped them sell them. And it was from that, really initial concept and that initial idea that I guess in a way I'm sitting here today, 20 years later, from putting in $400 to make those CDs to now, and obviously a lot's happened between now and then. But I've said this before, but the only difference between having a record label and not having a record label is saying you've got a record label. Because I didn't have a record label, I just had a name and a belief that maybe I could build one.
That's really weird. Yeah. Because that's like any business, really.
Yeah, it applies to anything in life. Yeah, like there's certain you could I can't say I'm a doctor.
Yes,
because I haven't trained as a doctor. But yeah, you could say you're a podcaster. You could say you're you're anything.
Well, I think we actually did say we had a podcast network, and basically it was my own 2 shows on the show of this network. There's nothing else there.
Me and a friend were joking the other day. Like, remember the show Entourage?
Yeah.
And like the manager E. He like registers his business, the Murphy Group.
Yep.
And they all tease him because like, it's just you. You can't be the Murphy Group. It's just you. But that's how you start, and you project something and you build something.
I'm a big believer in that. I get way too weird on this way too often. But do you think that was a big part of your story, was like creating something with really not much of an idea to do it, but you put this big picture out there and it sort of just manifests into something else?
I think in hindsight, yeah. Like at the time, I really didn't know what I was doing. I guess I felt empowered to try. I felt like supported by my folks, especially. I was living at home. They were paying, I didn't have to pay rent. It was sort of like almost, it wasn't pre-mobiles, but it wasn't like you weren't using mobile. So I was using the landline to like call Sydney, like to try to get a story in a magazine or something. And every now and then mum would be like, you just had like a $75 phone call to Sydney. Can you just like calm it down kind of thing? But I guess I just didn't feel like it was I either didn't think I could fail, or maybe I felt like I could handle the failure. But either way, I just kept going, and never really gave myself a chance to stop and go, this is too hard. I just sort of kept going.
And you're obviously bootstrapping this. You're doing it yourself. What sort of things were you doing for the bands? Like obviously booking in gigs, helping record. Like what lengths were you going to look after them?
Yeah, so technically a record label's job is to promote the sound recordings.
Yeah.
So the record label doesn't organize gigs or merchandise or all these sorts of things that I was actually doing. And so really what I was probably doing was overcompensating for the fact that maybe I wasn't actually a very good record label, because I didn't have a promotions department or a sales department. It was just me. So yeah, I would just help out however I could. Like organizing gigs was a big one, because these bands that I first started working with were so small. They didn't have an agent. They didn't have a manager. And so that's how it evolved for me. Eventually, a couple of the bands were like, hey, can you be our manager? So I'm like, oh, awesome, Boomtown Records, the management company, the empire expands kind of thing. There was a moment where one of the sort of first success stories we had was with a local band called Behind Crimson Eyes, and they were on tour in Perth, and they'd run out of T-shirts. And they called me up and they said, and I wasn't their manager, I was just their record label, but we really need T-shirts. Like, do you think you could organize them for us? I'm like, yeah. So I figured it out, got them printed, and then, all right, well, can you send them over? And then, we looked up how much it was going to cost, and it was going to cost a fortune to overnight these shirts to Perth. Then I went on Virgin. Oh, well, flight's only this much. You want me to just bring them over myself? And so that got on the plane with a few boxes of T-shirts, turned up in Perth, and next thing I know, I'm their manager because, that's the kind of lengths that I went to help. So it's just a few of these sort of key moments where I just sort of, I guess, took the bull by the horns and didn't really think there was another option, and it just opened doors for me, I guess.
I love that. I love that early days, like those little defining moments that can turn into something that you never thought you could be. Does anything stand out to you where there was a first moment you go, fuck, I could be onto something here. This is cool.
Yeah. Well, that band especially, it was a really interesting time. So Behind Crimson Eyes ended up selling, a lot of records. Probably sold about 20,000 records. And I was so not in the music industry. I was probably 19. I didn't even know how to check the ARIA charts other than buying the newspaper and flicking through. It was that kind of early days. But it was moments where our band started to get played on Triple J and started to get into things like the ARIA charts, where the big moment for me was the Amity Affliction, who's a band that we've worked with for many years. They had their first #1 record. And that was a moment for me where they were up against the presets. And we thought there's no chance of beating the presets. Wouldn't it be great to have a #2 record? But we had a #1 record. And so that was the first time that me and the company, and there was only a handful of us at the time. But what kind of came next was really quite amazing because the business was, so this is around 2012. We were working with Amity Affliction, Violent Soho, Illy, North Lane, amazing bands. And then one day my little brother called me up and he said, one of my mates just recorded a new song that I want to send to you. And I was like, oh, who is it? He said, oh, it's James. I was like, oh, James, yeah, James Keogh. And he's like, yeah. And I was like, oh, I didn't know he was making music, but that's cool. Yeah, send it over. And the song was Riptide by Vance Joy. And it was a funny moment because I don't know why I did this, but the first thing I did after I finished listening to the song was I stood up and I shut my door. And I was in the office, so I don't know who I was trying to hide this from, but I was like, oh my freaking God. Yeah. I've just found something that, as far as I knew at that point, it was me, James, and my brother were the only people that knew about it. So I got to shut the door so no one else finds out.
I just got goosebumps then when you told that story.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
So that was a pretty pivotal moment because I guess I set it up there with the Amity Affliction story because I was, didn't necessarily think I was at the top of my game, but equally was very proud of where we're at as a business and the achievements that we were having and the success we were having, particularly with the more hard rock and hardcore bands. But then to have something like that come into my life and go, oh wow, this is incredible. I guess just allowed me to, open up my whole idea of what was possible. And not to say we left anything behind, all those artists still work with us today, but we were able to build the business to a whole nother level.
Wow. Just on James, what happened from there? Once you heard Riptide, what was the discussion with him? How did things transpire?
Yeah, so I got his number off my brother Aaron, and I called James, and he didn't answer because he was a gardener at the time. And he called me back shortly after 5 o'clock when he'd finished work. And he was stoked to hear from me, and I was stoked to hear from him because I was starting to get stressed, which is just, I was like, oh my God, pulling my hair out. But no, it was literally the next day where we caught up, and because him and my brother have been friends for many years, so we had a relationship. We just never had a professional relationship. So, but I think the personal relationship really helped because he knew that he could trust me. I knew that I could trust him. He knew that I could do the work. I didn't have the track record of working with an artist like that. But that's actually where my wife came in. So Rachel, who I work with to this day, we weren't married at the time. We just started dating, and she was working at a different management company, and she had more of a background working with artists like Vance Joy. And so I said to her, well, why don't we co-manage Vance Joy together? You have your business, I have my business, and we'll just do it together. And that was sort of how it all started. And that weekend we went and saw him play. He was playing a little tapas bar on Smith Street called Babita, which isn't there anymore. We went down there, and there was probably like eight people having their dinner, and he's just in the corner playing a few songs, and all of a sudden he plays a Riptide, and everyone's like, what the hell is that? And yeah, kind of the rest is history, really. We pretty quickly took him overseas and started meeting different like big labels over there, and it was definitely some people say overnight success, but it was a very long night.
If it's an overnight, 30-year overnight success.
Yeah, exactly. And so it'll be 10 years this year since we started working with James. So a long time in the scheme of a lifetime, but a lot that's been achieved in that time.
Oh, he's just absolutely incredible story, and yeah, from all reports, like it's in that mutual. I feel like maybe he's just got that thing about him being Australian, and I feel like everyone thinks they know him. Like you feel like you are connected to him, and obviously he played footy as well. So like every time I see him, I'm just like, fuck, that's Vance Joy. Funny story about Vance Joy though. We talk about music, and I think like the most incredible part about it, and just a funny story about that in particular, was when I moved to Sydney. And this is why I love music so much. You can really like put soundtracks to your life, and like when a song hits you at a certain time, it means so much in different ways. And I remember when I left footy, I'd just gone to from Carlton, really like weird time in my life. I was really stressed. I had no fucking idea what I was going to do, and I just got this opportunity that I don't even know to this day. I wake up sometimes and think, if that didn't happen, I don't know where I'd be. So I remember going to the airport. I literally found out I was going to the Giants. Within like 2 hours, I was on a flight, and there was all this like thing about the flight, and my head was buzzing, and I was jumping on this Qantas flight, and I just didn't know where I was, had no idea what was going on. And I remember seeing this guy being like, fuck, I know that guy. And normally I'd always go up and say hello to someone if I know them. But I was at that time, I was like, oh, no, I'm just moving to Sydney, like just in my head, just got to do this. And as soon as I got off the plane, I realised it was Vance Joy. And ever since like that moment, I was like, fuck, I'm going to listen, I was listening to all his music. So all like nostalgically, Riptide like just brings back that time of my life. It's got such a special moment to it. And I suppose where I'm going with this, in a very long-winded speech, is that song can mean something completely different to what it means to me. But I love the fact that whatever happens, like it's still connected to me in that way.
Yeah.
With him. So you can pass that on if you like.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Yeah. And that's the beauty of music. Like it's a soundtrack to our lives. We could try to live without it, but we'd struggle to live without music, I think.
Well, imagine like that's one person that's listening to that song. Imagine the 100 of other million people that have a different resemblance to that song for them.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so crazy.
Totally.
So crazy. Other artists that, you've worked with, I wonder, like with this, I know what it was like being a player and how managers or management or labels come around and clubs, meeting with clubs. Like how do you go about signing artists? With labels?
Yeah. So I guess to sort of expand a little bit, so Unified Music Group is a group of companies. So like as I said right at the beginning, Boomtown Records just started as a record label, but now we have a record label, we have a management company, we have a booking agency, we have a merchandise company, we have a music publishing business, we have a festival company. They're all under the group of Unified Music Group. Awesome. So we're signing different artists in different ways all the time, and so really it comes down to the team wanting to work with the artist. So we don't have a system where like sort of I sign everyone and just sort of hand them off to people to do the work. It's very much the team members are empowered to go and find artists that they want to work with, and sort of there's some permission that's required, but very little. It's like, if you believe in this, let's go, let's do that. A lot of artists do come to the company, so we're able to sort of share those artists with the team. Hey, we're having a conversation with this artist who wants to get involved, that sort of stuff. But ultimately, we're in the business of building careers. And so we want to connect with people that we think we can work with to help build their careers.
Awesome. Early days though, was that just you doing it?
Yeah, it was just me probably for the first 5 years of the business. So yeah, I would just find a band that I loved and back them. And, in hindsight, I could look at the ones that were successful and the ones that weren't. In hindsight, I could see why. Maybe the genre was too niche, or I don't know, the band didn't tour as much. But then I just signed bands that I loved, things that I thought were going to do really well.
What was it about artists? And I suppose this isn't a one size fits all type question, but was there something in a group or artist that you'd always look for where you go, I want to sign these guys?
I think it used to be that I just loved the music, and it still is that I love the music. But I think in this day and age, like where we are right now, with how competitive, the attention economy is, as far as like getting people's attention, we need to work. Like artists need to work harder than ever. Yeah, everyone does. Sports people, podcasters, business people, everyone's working harder than ever. But ultimately, it also comes down to what your goals are, and so it's about trying to sit with someone and go, look, I really love what you do, but what are you trying to achieve? Because if you don't want to put in the hard yards, it's less like we don't want to work with you. It's more going, well, you probably don't need us. You can probably just do that on your own. Because the reality is we're in the business of managing professional music careers. We're not in the business of managing, Dyl, who plays at the local pub every second Friday. There's no point you paying us a commission for you to do that gig. You can just figure it out yourself.
Well, that was probably where like the question comes from, because I think, I go see a lot of live gigs. I love going out watching people, and I go, after a few beers as well, your eardrums might be more like lubricated to listening to people sing. But I always think, like, this person that's singing tonight, I normally fall in love with them and go, how are you not on a world stage? And I was wondering if there's something that separates, you look at someone like, James or Kid Leroy or Tash Sultana, for example, that have gone from Australia to absolute incredible heights versus other Australian artists that are nearly just as good on talent but haven't been able to do it. Like, does that make sense? I suppose there's not a one fit answer to that as well.
No, it's such a hard one. It's like people talk about like the hit song Next Door. Like John across the street might have the best song ever. Yeah. He's a Sparky or a school teacher, like whatever he does or she. Anyone can make a great song. Anyone can have a great voice. Anyone can be a great guitar player. But can you pull it all together into that one magical, get struck by lightning kind of moment? Like, that's the bit that I think if we could figure that out, like we'd all be doing it. Because I know plenty of artists, and I've worked with plenty of artists that are like, this is the song, this is it, this is going to happen, and then just nothing happens. And there's probably some clever word or phrase for it, but it's just sometimes it just doesn't. It's like it's missing that magic, that magical moment. Yeah.
There's a band that I love in the UK, and I actually they're very small, and I've messaged them heaps. They never get back to me. But it's called Frankie Stew and Harvey Gunn. They're like an English rap duo. They got like 10,000 followers, but I listen to them all the time. Yeah, I'm like, how the fuck are these guys not like world renowned artists? And to be honest, they still could. Yeah. But I've always just thought about it. Like, it's just such a crazy, such a fickle industry. Like, you could be in, out. Like, you just don't know what it takes. But as you said, you have to be hitting all the marks. Yeah, and what we're doing, we've been working with the Amity Affliction for over 15 years, like Violent Soho for over 10 years, Illy, Vance Joy 10 years this year. Like, we're all about building long-term careers. Like, that's really our point of difference. Yeah. We'll work with any genre of music, but equally we're not going to just jump on the new trend of a genre, whether it's, the flavor of the month. Yeah. Like, we're really rap. All about, we're all about, investing in careers. Like, and that's a theme that will just continue to come up for me. Like, it's all about, because for me, like, I pinch myself that I've been able to have a career like this from music. If I can help artists do that, like when I see a musician buy their first house, like that's like the coolest thing ever, because there's this myth that like artists are all poor, right? And there's plenty of poor artists, but there's also plenty of poor everythings. Yep. But when you get it right, and when you put in the hard yards and you do the right planning and strategy, and when you can be a part of making that happen, like that gives you a real sense of joy. Is there a favorite sort of success story that you like to reflect on and go, wow, like how did we help this artist or work together to get to here? Like, is there one that you think you really, work together, unified holistically with the artist that got them to where they are? Yeah, like I never want to take too much credit because it all comes down to us just helping amplify the talent that's already there. Although, like, a lot of work goes into getting an artist to a place of success, because it's also time. Like,
it was probably 3 years before, like with any artist, like it doesn't just happen overnight. Like I'm really proud of the Amity Affliction story. I'm really proud of the Violent Soho story. I don't know if you know much about that band.
No.
But so they're a band from Brisbane who we've been managing for almost 10 years. When we actually signed them, they'd sort of had a career before us. They'd been signed to a big label in America, moved to the US, had a crack, didn't kind of work out, and they moved back. And they started again at the start. Their first time back in Australia, they played like the Tote, which is, a great pub in Collingwood, but it's, it's a pretty small venue. And so Nick Yates, who unfortunately doesn't work with us anymore at the company, but he was their manager, and he was like, Jaddan, trust me, this band's going to be the thing, right? And so I was really busy overseas with Vance and other artists traveling around. And so I kind of missed the moment where it all kind of took off. It was the big day out, which is, feels like a long time ago now, but where they just really kind of broke through on that tour, and their song Covered in Chrome became like a huge hit and big Triple J Hottest 100 moment. And all of a sudden the band went from, playing the Tote, to the Corner Hotel, to all of a sudden playing, like really big venues and sort of becoming a bit of a household name. And so just getting to see the hard work that was put in by Nick Yates and his team and the band and the wider team, it's just really rewarding to see a band, put in that work and get those results.
Huge. Yeah. Violent Soho, I only embarrassingly discovered them like a couple of years ago when I was watching the best of the Triple J Top 100.
Yeah.
Crazily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great
They're
band.
huge. Awesome. Speaking about yourself, something that I love about you and really admire is the way you've been able to do this. I think if you look at your business, your group, Unified Music, and how big that is, and knowing all the effort and work that's put into it, what would you say to anyone that's getting into business, firstly, and what have been some of maybe your biggest lessons in being able to get to where you are?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Actually, I went and spoke at my high school careers night the other week.
Yeah. What school did you go to?
St. Kevin's College.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so they hit me up on LinkedIn, and I got back to them, and I went down, and there was about 20 different like rooms set up for different career paths, and it was like year 9s and 10s, and so it was everything from like real estate to military to trades, everything. And so I was in the startup and entrepreneur room, and so it was me and two other a venture capital lawyer and a startup founder. And it was really interesting because I'm like, I got to take this really seriously because I'm speaking to really young minds about giving them advice on, how to get started. Because in a way, I kind of almost started Boomtown when I was still at school. And then I went on to have some of my biggest success with Vance Joy, who also went to the same school. So I was like, these kids are going to be really listening to what I have to say. For me, because I started at such a young, inexperienced age, I had no idea what I was doing. So I have to kind of almost like retrofit my advice, which I do now in real time as we start new businesses or we invest in new businesses. I think the biggest thing is like getting clear on what it is you're trying to achieve. Like why do I want to do this? Why do I want to solve this problem? Heaps normal. Why do we want to start a non-alcoholic beer company? We didn't start it, but we're one of the early investors in it. Getting really clear on that, and then getting good people around you and creating a good plan so you can then execute on that. I shouldn't admit stuff like this publicly, but like I remember we worked with this band early on called The Getaway Plan, who put out an incredible album called Other Voices, Other Rooms. Yeah,
Nice fringes as well.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I remember hanging out with my big brother, and he was like, he's like, "Oh, how's everything going?" I'm like, "Yeah, good. Yeah, Getaway Plan's going to the studio tomorrow to record." And he's like, "Oh, cool." Like he's like, "How do you pay for that?" And I literally looked at him. I said, I actually don't know. And he's like, well, what do you mean you don't know? He's like, they're going to record tomorrow. I was like, yeah, fuck. I better figure that out, hey? And like it was those sorts of moments of like, and I ended up putting it on my credit card or something ridiculous like that. It was like back in the day when the ANZ would give like your cat a credit card.
Yeah.
That was like literally a thing. But it was just like probably like not being prepared enough and not actually like knowing something like that was coming and not actually figuring out a plan. And probably I didn't want to face the fact that I probably didn't have the money to do it. And which is terrible advice, like especially as an investor. Like we're constantly investing in companies so they can have runway, so they can burn cash, so they can grow. For me, we bootstrapped in the most like literal sense of the word. Like we were just working off absolutely nothing. So yeah, being a bit more prepared and probably like and yeah, I've got you onto Good to Great by Jim Collins, but like confronting the brutal facts, like going, okay, like the brutal fact is I got a $10,000 invoice due next week and I've got no money. What am I going to do about it? Whereas instead I just pretended it wasn't happening. And it took my brother asking me a casual question while we were probably playing like Tony Hawk or something like that to actually figure out what I had to do.
Did you, from that moment as well, do you think like the biggest learnings have been from those mistakes? And then what did you do to implement change? Did you have mentors? Did you like seek, I know you do a lot of reading.
Yeah.
Like what have been the biggest like helps in that space?
Yeah, I think like the first, like one of the most important people in my business life is Matthew Rogers, who's my chief operating officer. He's been at the company 11 years. But he was the first person I hired that was like a non-income generating role, which is probably like I think a big moment for excuse me, for a founder.
What do you mean by that? Sorry, non-income generating. So he was
not on the front, not a sales role.
Yeah.
So like for example, like all of my managers or all of our people that are working with artists, they're bringing in revenue.
Yep.
Whereas, yeah, someone that's purely just working on the business, they're just there to support the growth of the business. And so obviously we had like bookkeepers and stuff as contractors, but bringing in, understanding early the importance of building a team that was going to help build the engine to support the business, like that was probably the most pivotal moment for me. And now Matt oversees a team that has, you know, legal, finance, HR, operations, IT, commercial marketing, and he's got like a whole team of people that don't generate a cent, but support the ability for the group to operate at the level that it does. And so they're big investments and take a lot of time to build those capabilities. But yeah, going back to the start, like trying to find the things you're good at and doing them, and doing the things you're not good at and finding other people to do them for you. And that's where I was really lucky to find Matt, because we've become, you know, right and left hand man sort of thing. And now we sort of essentially run the group together.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Super cool. In terms of like reading and stuff too, I know you love to get heaps of experience and knowledge from other people in that sense. Has there been any big lessons that you've really taken out of anything you've digested like that?
Yeah, I read a lot. I read a lot of different stuff. Like I mentioned Jim Collins.
Yep.
He speaks very clearly to me in a sense of how he describes business. And what I like about the way Jim does it is he's not just working off a theory. He does research. And so he researches companies and executives and executive teams and goes, well, in this many cases, this percentage of people did this and that was successful. So I recommend that you should do this. And that sort of like really pragmatic approach to analyzing data. I'm reading another book at the moment called CEO Excellence, which is like super nerdy title. Obviously, I was actually listening to it on the way here because I've got a theory where if you read it and listen to it, you've got better chance of consuming the information. And I don't do that with every book. I sort of like read a bunch and then it's like the listening to it, I see that as like installing it, like downloading the app into your brain. But that's another book that's been written in this sort of research concept. And then it's sort of like recommendations of how you do things. And oftentimes you're just reading stuff you already know. But if I go back to the start, I didn't know this stuff. Like the first book I ever read in this sort of space was a book called Goals. I can't even remember the guy's name who wrote it, but it was like a very like 1980s, like, you know, corduroy jacket kind of like business coach person telling you how to run a business. And then sort of got onto like books like The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Like these are all like classic, you know, business books. And they're like, you know, in one sense it's like, oh, you run this cool music company, what the hell are you doing reading these books? But I kind of took this view kind of early on where it's like, I could build my career on being known as the person that finds the next great talent, or I can be known as the person that helps build great careers. And that's not just the artists that we work with, it's also the team, that, you know, the actual staff members and the wider group of companies that we work with. And so I sort of made this call to like, how do I learn to be better? Because, you know, I finished high school in 2002 and then 2001. I then went and studied a business degree until 2004. But, you know, that's 18 years ago. Like if you're not keeping up, if you're not learning, you're falling behind. And once again, it comes back to your goals. My goal was to keep up. My goal was to invest in myself so I can invest in others. So, reading, podcasts, mentors, conferences, all that stuff's been really important to me.
Love that. I think exactly what you said today is exactly what I'm trying to get better at personally. Like, is consuming content that I know is going to help me. And it's only in the last sort of couple of months as well I've realised how I best learn. And for me, we get as a past player, like, we used to get our education like subsidised. So you'd have to pay up front when you complete it. You get reimbursed for it, which is incredible when you think about it. It's absolutely unbelievable. Bad thing for me was I'd always start them, never finish them, so I'd never get the money back. But what I realised in the last sort of couple of years, I love just talking to people, learning their stories, learning from what they've done, listening to podcasts, and digesting and listening to books as well has been huge. So my advice to anyone out there, not that anyone's asking for it, but it's find out the best way that you learn, because it's not the same as everyone else. And I'm really big on now trying to get better, because I don't have any regrets, but the one is that I wish I just tried a little bit harder in school. And really, until it's too late, you realise the power of education and getting yourself better is actually so much cooler than you think when you're young. Yeah,
I would love to go to uni right now, or like go and study right now. Like how exciting it would be to go and learn new things. I don't have time, but I'm doing it in my own way. But the idea of figuring out how to learn or what works for you, like. So I was so impressed the other night when I went back to my school and heard these kids talk. So I mentioned there was a venture capital lawyer and there was a lady named Pip Stocks, who was the other panelist in my room. She's started a startup called Hearsay, and her boys go to St. Kevin's, hence why she was invited to speak. She did a presentation on her business, and she sort of explained how she's not a technical founder. She's a sort of marketing and strategy, and she outsources her technology. This kid puts his hand up. This kid must have been 15, and he literally asked her, "Hey Pip, as a non-technical founder of a tech company, of a B2B SaaS company, have you found it difficult talking to venture capital when raising capital because you're non-technical?" And I'm like, how do you even know what those words mean,
I
dude?
sort of zoned out then, yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, and these are questions that people like, me and Nick Crocker and stuff ask all the time. But I was like, wait. And so clearly this kid's like, whether he's listening to Gary Vee or Tim Ferriss, or he's like, even there's probably like TikTok channels that are talking about this stuff. Exactly. Yeah. And so find the way you can learn. And because I think like if I could be that kid, again, listening to the podcast that I'm now listening to, think about the advantage these kids have got. Yeah. And like so much of society wants to say things like, "Oh, kids these days, all they do is, look at TikTok and vape or whatever." Like maybe that's what they do, but they're doing so much more than that. So much more. And anyone that underestimates this generation is just like so far behind. It's not funny, because I was so blown away by these kids. Like I'm like, can I just hire all of you like right now? Yeah. Like you're the future. Yeah.
No, I couldn't agree more. We and I had a mindset when I was sort of coming through. You think anyone younger than you, like you're competing with them and you need to be better. But now I've learned, especially in this industry what we're in, we're trying to help up and coming talent. We want to be a part of it. We want to be on the journey, because at the end of the day as well, selfishly, we're going to be old real quick and no one's going to care about us anymore. Yeah. And if we've got cool people with us, we can still, help them and live through their careers as well, which is something that we love about working with young people. Yeah. And they can teach you so much shit. Like, totally. I'm 29. I'm talking about like 18-year-olds that are coming through. They know so much more than what we do.
Totally. And you get old quickly. Like I'm 38. I'm not old, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm young. I still feel young. I can still bounce out of bed and stay up all night and do all the things I need to do. But in the sense of being fully connected to culture and everything that's going on, it's not possible. And you're much better to be doing that through others. And it's such a mutually beneficial relationship when, once again, you're investing in their careers and helping support their growth. It's a huge opportunity for people, for all of us as we get older.
Love it. Just on the learning thing, one more. What do you need to get better at yourself? Is there something that you're focusing on at the moment that you've identified that you're trying to improve?
Yeah, honestly, I think I just want to be a better CEO. Probably why I'm reading this book.
What parts of that is it like?
It's a really interesting thought around, you're the owner, but you're also the CEO. I guess you call it founder and CEO, because it's your business, but you're also employed to run it. And it's this really interesting friction that I don't think gets discussed enough. It'd almost be easier to have investors because I could report to someone. But the reality is the only person I can really report to other than myself is my team. Because at the end of the day, although I'm the main shareholder, or the only shareholder really, everything flows back to me. But these people have taken a risk coming to work for me. So it's my responsibility to lead and run the business. So for me, when I'm talking about being the CEO, it's probably like vision, like overall vision. Like I think that I've been relatively good at that to this point. But as I sort of touch on, I'm getting older. I'm not in like a, sad or kind of whatever way. Like it's just like I'm getting older. Like if another 10 years I'll be 48, 10 years I'll be 58. It's like, what are we doing to build this company to be a lasting company, to be one that can last for 50, 100 plus years? The way that Japanese look at companies, they don't look at quarters and annual profit. They're looking at how do we build this business to last forever. And that's the kind of stuff that I'm thinking about a lot, especially in a world that's fast changing with, technology and climate change and, all sorts of like human rights issues in society. Like companies have got more responsibility, I think, than ever to play an active role in these topics. So that's where I really want to sort of continue to level up as the leader of the business.
Yeah, I love that. If I answer that question myself, which I'm sure you're very keen to know, and if you're not, just pretend you are. I think early days in like business in this world where I never thought I'd even be in a business, I was trying to like learn things and manage people and do all this stuff until I realized like I need to fucking work out what I'm doing myself first, like put my own ski mask on, master my own emotions, have my own goals and a vision like that's clear enough to then be able to help other people. Because if I don't know what I'm doing, like what does that mean for everyone else? So that's probably where I'm at, and that's what I got out of our chat that we had, probably 3 or 4 months ago. Was going, fuck, like how can I do this if I don't know what I'm doing in my own head and my own goals, my own vision, it was a massive help.
That's awesome. Yeah. It changes over the journey, and it's so complex because you're like, by nature as an entrepreneur, you're going to get distracted by new opportunities, right?
Yeah.
And I've been given lots of great advice along the way, but someone said to me, not all that glitters is gold. And I just always try to remember that. And it's a saying that everyone's heard before, but it's true. Like just because there's an opportunity, like doesn't mean it's the best opportunity. The timing could be wrong. You have to say no to things in business because you're much better off doing something really well than, a whole bunch of things just mediocre.
Yep.
And that's been definitely like something that's probably held me back over the years because we do have so many focuses as a group. It's like as if I wasn't busy enough, like I went and launched Side Stage Ventures so we could, contribute to the venture capital ecosystem. It's like probably didn't need to do that. But equally absolutely stoked that we did. We're on the cusp of launching our gaming business, which is in managing gaming talent.
Wow.
Once again, it didn't really need to do that, but we see it as a really important part of the future of the business and the future of our industry. So, but it's doing things in the right way with the right resources, with the right timeline, so you don't sort of trip up.
And
when you're
ready to do it.
When you're ready, exactly. Yeah.
If we look at the stories are very contrasting of starting out something and not even comparing myself to you, but the early days, I think we've fallen victim a lot of just grabbing whatever's available, and you just like go for everything. You think, fuck, there's something there, I need to go for it. And really quickly I've realized that like for me, options have nearly been the worst thing to have. It's like when you're really in a place where you don't know what you want. When you're in a place where you don't have an option and the only option is to do one thing, you'll get there straight away because your vision's there and you're like, bang, this is me. I'm going to nail it and do it. And then when opportunities present, there's too many. You can get clouded and you do like 10% of 100 versus 100% of one.
Yeah.
So that's something as well that's been really hard to sort of mask. And in that, when I was saying before about working out what we want to do and what we want to stand for, it's like finding those 3 things and going 33.3% into them versus 100 things of 1% each.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Which has been really interesting. Anyway, I'm just going to myself here.
No, I love it.
Side Stage Ventures, this is unbelievable. Loving what you're doing there. Where'd the idea come about? I know you said you shouldn't have, but you definitely should have. You guys are killing it because you were doing a lot of investing before this was even launched anyway.
Yeah, so it was back in 2016. It was like, Vance Joy was happening, everything was happening, and we had a whole bunch of different companies all under the umbrella of Unified. And I was busy, and Rachel, my wife, said to me, she goes, I think we just launched maybe one of our festivals, and she was like, you maybe spreading yourself a bit too thin. Like, rather than starting companies, why don't you just invest in companies? And I was like, great advice. 3 weeks later, I went and made my first investment. She was like, I didn't mean it literally. But I think it's that idea of sort of manifesting things where things sort of arrive. So within a few weeks, I got introduced to a guy from the Central Coast, New South Wales, called Sonny, who's built this really incredible business called STL Tones. And it's software for music producers. So it's like music plugins. It's become a really successful business. At the time, it was just an idea, and I didn't really understand it, but I could see the vision. So I invested a small amount of money, sort of made a bunch of introductions to my network of music producers and stuff. And then we started to help support him from a sort of finance and operations point of view. And he's built a really successful business that's still growing. So that was sort of the first time I got a chance to not run the business, but support the founder. And I was like, whoa, that felt good. I really liked that. And it sort of complemented this concept of investing in careers and investing in talent. And so then 2018, so Rachel and I lived overseas in the US from 2014 to 2018, the first half in New York, the second half in Venice Beach, which is just out, or technically in Los Angeles. My next door or neighbor just across the road starting this business called Winston House. He was raising capital at sort of traditional venture capital type round, and I put in a really small check, as they say, or as we say in the industry. And it was my first sort of the STL Tone investment. In hindsight, was a bit more of a co-founder situation, whereas this is the first time I put a check into a business and got a really small bit of equity, and was even more removed than I was from STL Tones. And so that was sort of the beginning of me going, okay, this is interesting, investing in this. And that opened me up to the venture capital network in America. And I did a couple of investments there. And then I was, I try to guess dates, but it's roughly 2018, 2019. I was back in Australia, and me and two of my best friends, Anthony and Alex Zachariah, who started Bolster Agency, but then went on to start Linktree.
Oh, wow.
We were backstage at Splendor in the Grass, and we were sort of talking about investing and all sort of stuff. We're like, we should start an investment capital business, venture capital business. And we're like, we didn't even really know what we were talking about, but we're like, we shared that same love of supporting, investing in founders. And so we actually went and invested in two Melbourne music tech startups, Muso and Tixel, who are two really successful companies. But then it was when COVID hit in 2020, me and Alex started a Saturday afternoon Zoom hangout for like angel investors. And we would just basically get on Zoom and talk about companies we wanted to invest in. And when I say group, it was really just me, him, and our other friend and co-founder of SideStage, Matt Allen, who's quite a well-known angel investor. And we were sort of, it was Melbourne, it was lockdown, we were bored. Anyway, one day Alex goes, I think I'm going to invest in this company. Oh, what is it? It's called Mr. Yum. And we're like, oh, that looks cool. We want to invest too. And then and all of a sudden, a whole bunch of us want to invest. And so we had a call with Adrian and Kim, the founders of Mr. Yum. And they were like, oh, we'd love you guys to invest. You guys are so cool. But the only problem is we can't take all of your investments. We can only take one investment line. I don't know if you know how it works with the cap table.
No.
So a company can only have up to 50 investors before it has to report as a public company in Australia. And so I think there was 7 of us. So they were like, if they had to take all 7, it was going to, that's
too many. Yeah.
So only do one. And we're like, oh God, what are we going to do? And Matt's like, well, why don't we start a syndicate? So we can all invest into the one line. Well, what are we going to call it? Well, what about Side Stage Ventures? And that was sort of I'm missing bits of details here, but that was sort of the simple formative story of Side Stage Ventures, which sort of, I guess, follows a bit of a pattern back to the beginning of my career in terms of have an idea, just go and do it.
Yeah.
Obviously, bit more sophistication. We ticked a few more boxes and, covered off on legalities and stuff like that. But that was the formative idea of Side Stage, which we didn't end up launching publicly until May of this year, so May 2022. We had a really cool party at the Corner Hotel, which I invited you to, but I think you were away.
I was away.
You were away, yeah. But yeah, so we've since invested in Heaps Normal, in Mr. Yum, Equal, Tixel, like QSIC, like a bunch of really exciting companies. And we sort of found ourselves, we say we're investing at the intersection of creativity, technology, and culture. It's like deliberately really broad and kind of vague, but equally when you boil it down, it sort of talks about the kinds of founders that we want to invest in. We're not just trying to find someone who's figured out the hack for making lots of money. We're trying to find founders that are looking at things creatively. Heaps Normal's not a tech company, but they've solved a really massive problem in a very creative way. And I know everyone's doing it now. I just walked past a Dan Murphy's billboard about zero alcohol. Zero alcohol is the cool thing right now. But Heaps Normal, I refer to them as the Tesla of non-alcoholic beer. So they only sell non-alcoholic beer. Like everyone else has just decided to take the alcohol out of their beer, whereas Heaps Normal's made non-alcoholic beer. In the same way, Volvo's put a battery on the side of their car, whereas Tesla only make electric cars. So Heaps Normal to me is like, one of the proudest investments I've ever made, just for what it says and what it's doing for society. But yeah, anyway, Side Stage Ventures, we're here, we're in business.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And what is someone like? Do you take inbound requests, or is it more like you'll sort of like scout people that you want to look for?
It's very similar to the music industry.
Yeah,
that's the thing, and that's why it's really fit well into what I do. We had a party, a Christmas party at our office in Richmond about, I think it was 2018, and I was standing there with the founders of Muso and Tixel, who are these companies I keep talking about. So you'll have to look them up.
I've heard of Tixel. Tixel is like you buy tickets for music shows.
So secondary tickets.
Yeah.
So if you bought a ticket and you can't go, you put it up there and I can buy it.
Yeah.
And then Muso basically puts on, like, helps venues book bands that kind of maybe aren't set up, don't have the infrastructure to put on bands. So the Rising Sun Hotel wants to have, a jazz trio on Tuesday afternoon or Sunday afternoon. They can sign up to Muso, and then there's all these artists that are vetted on the platform, and then there's sort of like a matchmaker. It's really, really
That's
cool.
Awesome.
Doing very well. But one of them said, how do you split your time between everything you do? And this answer just came out of my mouth that has sort of led me, from that moment. And I said, well, at the end of the day, I look at talent. Talent's all the same to me. Like whether it's my team members, whether it's an artist, or whether it's a founder, like I just make myself available to them, and my job is to help build their careers. And they were like, whoa, that's cool. And I was like, yeah, I just made it up, but I think it makes sense. And so to me, this idea of finding talent in founders is very similar to music. So we get a lot of inbound inquiries, and we do our best to get back to everyone and set up calls and stuff like that. But we're also doing a lot of our own, outreach. And then the other thing that happens in investment, which is different to music, is you hear about a lot of investments from other investors.
Yep.
So like a band can't sign to Sony and Universal. They got to choose one or the other. Whereas Blackbird and Side Stage can both invest in the same company. And so there's often a mutual benefit to teaming up with other investors, because maybe you sort of can share some knowledge, or you can even share some risk. You can also support each other and support the founders more. So that's something that I really like about the investment and startup community. It's quite it's very much a community.
We obviously had Nick on the show a couple of months ago, who is a close friend of yours, mutual friend of yours, and I think that's actually how we came to know each other.
That's right.
But Nick made a really interesting point, and I love this point a lot, and I would be keen to know if you share the same opinion. But when looking at businesses and looking at people, we asked, do you invest in people or do you invest in businesses? And he had a really interesting answer around investing in people. Is it similar for you?
Yeah, well, I think he has a saying like, does this founder envisage the future that they hope to build, or something like that? Or do you believe they do? And yeah, 100%, because you can all, like, anyone could have a great idea. One of us could have the best idea right now and share it with the other, but you still got to go and execute it. You still have to build the podcast. You still have to build your football career. Vance Joy still had to go and tour around the world 50 times before everything happens, So yeah, you got to find the people that are willing to do the work. So I definitely and that's even more so with founders, because I don't know the percentage, but the chances are that a startup's going to fail. Like that's more would fail than succeed. And so when you're putting money into a business, especially a business that you're not going to be hands-on with, we can't have, I can't just turn up at Heaps Normal and start working. I could make a request and maybe discuss and negotiate something, but it's like you don't just walk in and start working like in the way that I can at Unified, in the same way that you can here. So you got to believe that the people you're backing are capable of doing the work.
Is there a quality in people that you look for the most? Is there a characteristic that you even just respect the most, or you look for in people that you love?
Yeah, like
broad question. Sorry, but yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah,
like I love, like I like to figure out if I can trust someone. Like that's the main thing. And I always work off the base that everyone is good, and everything that's bad about them is just layers of crap that they either had something to do with or potentially didn't. So like I truly believe everyone on this planet is good at their core. I always assume best intentions, like all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I want to get to the point if I can trust them, and I want to also understand like their humility levels as well, because I think one of the most dangerous things in society is ego, and that sort of trying to prove something, or it's all about me or something like that. I think the sooner we can cut through that, the better we can figure out what people's real motives are, and we can sort of connect more and be more helpful to them as we help them on their journey.
I like it. I was just thinking about what I would look for in someone if I was investing in them. I think the one thing that I would look for in people, obviously trust is a massive one, but I'd like to know that they've been through, they've had adversity. Like they've probably I'd like to know that they've failed before they've done this thing. Because I think you can't really know something well enough if you haven't failed before it.
Yeah.
And that's just from personal experience.
Yeah, and failure is amazing. And knowing how to deal with failure, I think, is the best thing. Because someone said to me recently, and I shared this with a friend who challenged me on it, and we talked it out. But someone said, success is a series of good decisions made consecutively. And we're like, yeah, it's really good. But the thing missing here is the acknowledgement of the failures that will also be peppered within the good decisions or along that journey. And so it's acknowledging that those failures will happen, and then figuring out how you're going to deal with those failures and how you're going to turn them into learning experiences and make you better.
Love it. I don't even know where to start on it, but you've done so much. Is there anything else you're looking to do? What's next for Jaddan?
So we're sort of been refining our vision in the last sort of year or so, and where we're working towards is this idea that Unified is building an ecosystem for creative talent to thrive. And it works for me because it answers this question of, why launch SideStage, or why launch the gaming business, or why we have country music festivals now, and it's this concept of going back to this idea of talent and careers and investing in good people with good ideas. It's if we're building this infrastructure to support creative talent, anything is welcome at that point. So we have this amazing back of house function that supports the finance and the legal, the operations. We have all these great frontline businesses. An artist or a staff member or a founder can tap into this ecosystem that we've built. So that's to me feels like probably the most clarity I've ever had in terms of like the journey that we're on. That doesn't answer what's next, because what's next could be anything really. That's where I'm at.
Love it. Huge. Mate, thank you so much for your time today. It's honestly been incredible. I've learned so much, and I think a lot of people listening will be really inspired to go out there and do it. We didn't touch on it today, but I'd like to say, like, a lot of people, like, you're a doer. And that's probably what I respect about, you the most, and what you've been able to do. You've just gone out and you've done it, created this incredible business, and made a lot of dreams come true. So if it means anything to you, it's a massive. I'm very admire what you've done, and hope that we can mimic it somehow. So thank you so much.
No, thank you, and likewise, I appreciate your time, and yeah, I'm looking forward to spending more time with you and getting to know you more.
Bloody oath.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers.